Headlights cut through fog on a ridge road in North Carolina, and the driver taps his brakes without knowing why. Locals call it Dead Man's Curve, one of 12 mountain passes across Appalachia where trucking companies rewrite routes and never explain the change. Something makes seasoned drivers slow down, roll up their windows, and refuse a second crossing after sunset. State highway departments have quietly rerouted freight lines around at least half of these roads over the last century, and not one official document explains why. Tonight we're driving all 12, pass by pass, and by the third one, you'll understand why nobody talks about the fourth. Comment your state below, because odds are, one of these roads already runs closer to you than you think. Number 2, Panther Gap and Widow's Climb. Panther Gap cuts through the Cumberland Ridge along the Kentucky-Virginia line, a narrow stretch that coal wagons first climbed back in the 1890s. Freight companies favored it for one simple reason. It shaved nearly 3 hours off the haul into town. For 60 years, that math held. Then, sometime in the 1950s, dispatch logs show drivers quietly requesting daylight-only routes through the gap, one after another, until night hauls stopped completely. You'd feel the temperature drop before you saw the sign for it, said Earl Dotson, a retired hauler who worked that route for over 20 years. He wasn't talking about elevation. Winters in the Coombalands get cold everywhere. Dotson insists this was different. A sudden 10-degree plunge that lasted exactly as long as the truck stayed inside the gap, then vanished the second he cleared the far ridge. Weather data from the era offers no explanation. State climate records for the region show no localized cold pocket, no unusual air current, nothing that would account for a swing that sharp in that shortest stretch of road. A county extension agent who studied the area in 1963 attributed the readings to instrument error and moved on to other complaints filed that same season. Dispatchers never wrote down a reason for the schedule change. They just stopped assigning night runs, and nobody who worked that gap ever asked them to reconsider. 2 more drivers, interviewed separately for a 2009 trucking union newsletter, described the same sensation using almost identical wording, despite never having worked the same shift together. Both mentioned the cold arriving in a single wall, not a gradual drop. Both mentioned it lifting the instant their tires crossed onto the far slope. 90 miles north, in the hills above a played-out coal camp in West Virginia, a second pass carries an even heavier reputation. Locals call it Widow's Climb, named for the 6 women in one church parish who lost husbands to separate accidents along that same half-mile stretch between 1911 and 1938. Company safety records list each death individually, a rock slide here, a brake failure there, but never once connect them, despite the identical location and a death rate 3 times higher than any comparable grade in the county. A regional mine inspector reviewing the accident file in 1940 flagged the pattern in a single internal memo, recommending the grade be widened for safety. The widening was approved, funded, and never completed. Construction equipment sat parked at the base of the climb for 11 months before the project was quietly canceled, with no budget explanation attached to the cancellation order. Truckers today still avoid stopping on Widow's Climb after dark, even for a flat tire. Ask why, and most won't give you a straight answer. One driver, interviewed for a 2014 regional oral history project, came closest. He said his headlights catch movement in the treeline every single time he crosses after sunset. Always in the same spot, always gone before he can look twice. 2 passes down, and already the pattern refuses to sit still. A cold that shouldn't exist, and a stretch of road that's killed the same kind of man 6 times over without anyone in charge ever asking why. What waits on the next 2 passes doesn't just bend the weather. It bends what people are willing to say out loud. Number 3, Salt Fork Notch, and the Hollow Bend. Bending what people say out loud is exactly what happened at Salt Fork Notch, a pass cut through the Blue Ridge foothills of Virginia in the 1920s to connect two logging camps separated by a solid wall of granite. Engineers called it a clean job, dry rock, stable grade. Nothing on the survey to worry about. Nothing, that is, until the crews who blasted it started refusing to work the final shift. Foreman Curtis Boyd kept a daily log through the entire project, and one entry from March of 1924 stands apart from the rest. He wrote that 3 men walked off the site an hour before sundown, offering no explanation beyond a single shared complaint. They could hear something breathing behind the rock face, in rhythm, every time the wind died down. Boyd dismissed it as exhaustion. He also noted, 3 lines later, that he heard it too. That log survives today in a regional historical society archive, and it's the only place the admission appears. Boyd never repeated the claim publicly, and the notch opened on schedule that summer. What changed is smaller, easy to miss unless you know to look for it. Every foreman assigned to Salt Fork Notch after Boyd scheduled his shift changes to end before dark, without a single supervisor above him ever questioning why. A retired forestry contractor, tracked down decades later by a graduate researcher studying the logging camps, offered one more detail that never made it into any official file. He remembered his own father refusing to eat lunch anywhere within sight of the rock face, choosing instead to walk nearly a quarter-mile back down the grade every single day for 30 years. If a foreman's private confession sitting untouched in an archive for a century is the kind of detail that keeps you watching, hit subscribe now, because the next 9 passes go even further than this one. South of the Notch, near the Tennessee state line, a sharp switchback known locally as the Hollow Bend C. South of the Notch, near the Tennessee state line, a sharp switchback known locally as the Hollow Bend carries a different kind of dread. Here it isn't sound or cold. It's distance. Drivers who've run that stretch for decades swear the bend takes longer to clear at night than it does during the day, even accounting for reduced speed. A 1988 trucking company memo, uncovered by a local historian, instructed drivers to log entry and exit times through the bend for 1 month as an internal test. The results never made it into any public report. What did surface, decades later, in an interview with one of the drivers involved, was a single detail. His numbers didn't match anyone else's, not even his own from 1 week to the next. He kept his personal notebook from that month, and a handwriting analyst who examined it years later for a documentary project found nothing unusual about the entries themselves, only about what they claimed. What does it take to bend 4 different things on 4 different roads? Temperature, mortality, sound, and now time itself. The 5th pass on this list doesn't just bend one of those things. It breaks all 4 at once, and it's the reason this list exists in the first place. Number 4, Cutthroat Pass. Cutthroat Pass breaks all 4 at once, and it does it in broad daylight, which is exactly what makes it the hardest case on this entire list to explain away. Cut through the Great Smoky Range in the 1930s to connect 2 logging operations, the pass earned its name from a labor dispute that turned violent during construction. 3 men killed in a single afternoon, their deaths ruled accidental by a coroner who never visited the site in person. For 20 years, the pass functioned exactly as intended. Then, in 1954, a survey crew sent to assess the road for paving reported something no engineer could reconcile. The temperature inside the pass ran a consistent 15 degrees colder than the surrounding ridgeline, regardless of season, regardless of weather. State forestry records from that survey still exist, and the crew chief's own handwritten note reads simply, "Recommend further study." No further study was ever conducted. Here's where Cutthroat Pass separates itself from everything before it. In 1967, a Tennessee highway engineer named Walter Pruitt ran an independent stability assessment, unrelated to the original survey, and stumbled onto the same 15-degree anomaly without ever seeing the 1954 report. Pruitt had no reason to expect it. His own notes, filed with the state and rediscovered decades later, described the sensation as walking into a refrigerator with the door already closed. Two men, 13 years apart, measured the exact same impossible number and never spoke to one another. A third data point surfaced almost by accident. In 1991, a university climatology student conducting fieldwork nearby ran a portable weather station through the pass out of simple curiosity, unaware of either prior report. Her equipment logged the same 15-degree gap, precise to within half a degree of Pruitt's original reading. Her advisor dismissed the finding as sensor malfunction and instructed her to exclude it from her published thesis. She kept the raw data anyway, and shared it publicly for the first time in a 2020 podcast interview, nearly 30 years after she recorded it. Picture standing where Pruitt stood, thermometer in hand, watching the reading drop degree by degree with no wind, no shade, no logical source for the cold at all. That's the moment locals point to when they explain why night crews stopped working Cutthroat entirely by the late 1960s. Not a ghost story, not a legend, but a temperature reading three separate professionals, across nearly 40 years, couldn't account for using anything in their training. The state paved around the anomaly rather than through it, rerouting the final grade nearly a quarter-mile south of the original survey line. Officially, the reroute cited erosion concerns. The original stretch, cold spot included, was left to grow over completely, and it has never been resurveyed since the climatology students' readings in 1991. Hikers who've bushwhacked into the abandoned original grade in recent years report the same sensation using the same word Pruitt used decades earlier, without ever having read his notes. A cold that arrives all at once and lifts just as fast. 8 passes remain on this list, and not one of them will hand you a colder mystery than this. What comes next moves away from what a thermometer can measure, into something a compass can't explain either. Number 5, the last 6, and the road that doesn't end. Compasses spinning without cause is the last thing anyone expects from solid granite. But that's exactly what hikers report along Devil's Elbow, a switchback pass in southwestern Virginia built in the 1890s to move timber down from the highest ridges in the state. 3 separate hiking parties, none connected to one another, filed nearly identical complaints between 1995 and 2011. Compass needles drifting a full 30 degrees off true north for the length of the crossing, then settling the instant hikers cleared the far switchback. No mineral deposit on record explains a pull that strong. North of Devil's Elbow, a shorter pass called Sawmill Grade carries a stranger reputation still. Loggers who worked the grade through the 1940s swore their own footsteps echoed back wrong, a half-second delayed, as though something behind them matched every stride a beat too late. Company records list no incidents, no injuries, nothing that would explain why the grade's night crew quietly dissolved within 18 months of opening. One surviving crew roster shows 11 names crossed out under a single heading, reassigned by request. Quick pause here. 7 passes down, 5 left, and every single one of them still runs open to traffic today. No gate, no warning sign, nothing but a driver's own instinct telling them to keep moving. 3 more passes in Kentucky carry a lighter version of the same story. Unexplained radio static that clears the moment a vehicle exits the grade. Headlights that dim without any electrical cause a mechanic could locate. And a stretch near Pine Mountain, where 3 separate 911 calls in the past decade described the identical phrase. A shape crossing the road that was gone by the time anyone looked twice. Dispatch recordings of those calls, reviewed by a local news station in 2019, confirmed the wording matches almost verbatim across callers who had never met. None of these 12 passes share a comp. None of these 12 passes share a company, a decade, or even a state. What they share is a decision made independently by dozens of people who never spoke to each other to simply stop driving through after dark. That decision is still being made tonight. Somewhere on one of these 12 roads, right now, a driver is slowing down for no reason he can name, checking his mirrors twice, watching the clock on his dashboard instead of the road ahead. He won't file a report. He won't call anyone. He'll just take the long way around, the same way every driver before him quietly chose to do, going back over a century, on ridgelines that have never once explained themselves to the people who built roads through them. 12 passes, 12 decisions made in silence, decade after decade, road after road. But there's a 13th pass we didn't cover tonight, the one locals still won't say by name, not even to their own families. Comment which of these 12 you'd actually drive at midnight, and we'll go find that 13th one next.